My uncle lifted his glass and bragged, $1.6 million, all cash, closing today. I calmly asked, "Are you certain you actually have the right to sell it?" He laughed it off. So I opened my folder, Grandma's deed, my name on it. His deal collapsed on the spot. There are some betrayals you never see coming, the kind that make your blood run cold. I found mine, not in a whispered secret, but in a giant industrial dumpster, overflowing with my grandmother's entire life and my own uncle's shocking deceit. The dirt road to Turner Ranch, the one I'd driven every single weekend for 6 years, felt different. Off. My hands gripped the steering wheel tighter than they should have as my tires kicked up those familiar dust clouds. I knew this route blindfolded, past the crooked mailbox, around the bend where wild sage grew, up the gentle slope to where Maggie's red barn roof usually appeared. But this time, when I crested that final rise, my foot slammed the brake. Hard. A massive, industrial dumpster, the kind that swallows small trucks whole, blocked the entire driveway. Its green metal sides towered over my sedan. I just stared, engine idling, confusion warring with something sharp, something ugly in my gut. I hadn't ordered this. My stomach clenched. Then I saw him. Ron. My uncle. Standing near the porch, not in his usual work clothes, but in clean khakis and a polo shirt I'd never seen before. He was gesturing at 3 men in work gloves. They were carrying things out of the house. Armloads of things. Moving with that cold, efficient brutality of people paid by the hour. I killed the engine. My door flew open before I even had a plan. Ron. The word cracked across the yard, thin and desperate. He turned, saw me, and his face, it did something I couldn't quite read. Not guilt, no. Maybe just surprise that I was early. Then, one of the workers heaved a cardboard box over the dumpster's edge, and I heard the sickening crash of breaking glass inside. That was it. My boots hit the gravel and I was running. The dumpster rim reached my shoulder. I had to grip the cold metal, pull myself onto my toes to see inside. And when I did, the breath just left my lungs. Grandma Maggie's gardening journals. The leather-bound ones she filled with her careful handwriting every spring for 40 years. They were just scattered at the bottom. Like trash. Spines broken. Pages splayed open in the mud that had pooled from yesterday's rain. A photo album lay face down, plastic sleeves torn, a corner of a photograph showing young Maggie in front of this very barn, pressed into the dirt. And then I saw it. The quilt. Oh God, the quilt. Cream and blue patchwork. Maggie and I had spent 3 winters sewing that together at her kitchen table. My stitches, so clumsy next to her perfect ones. She'd laughed and said the imperfect squares made it more honest. Now it was crumpled at the bottom like a rag, soaked, smeared, like someone had used it to wipe engine oil. Stop. The word ripped out of me, a raw scream. Stop right now. The workers froze, looking to Ron for direction. He started walking towards me, unhurried, and there was something in his expression that made my hands curl into tight fists. Chloe, he said my name, flat, dismissive, like a teacher scolding a child. This is estate business. Estate business? My voice shook. I couldn't stop it. You're throwing away her journals. Her photos. Clutter. He stopped a few feet away, tall, always using his height to intimidate. The property has liability issues. Insurance won't cover the place in this condition. Just then, another worker emerged from the house with a box. Ron, casual as anything, plucked a small leather journal from the top. Maggie's recipe book. The one with her mother's handwriting in the margins. He held it up between us, made sure I was watching. And then, he tossed it into the dumpster. It hit with a soft thud. A thud I felt right in my chest. You can't. My throat was closing, my voice barely a whisper. You have no right. I'm the executor, Chloe. The will was clear. He crossed his arms. And, before you get emotional, you should know the locks have been changed. New deadbolts. Professional grade. The property needs to be secured during the transition period. My eyes snapped to the front door. Shiny brass hardware where the old iron lock used to be. The lock Maggie gave me a key to 6 years ago, when she asked me to maintain the place because she was too weak. His wife, Elaine, appeared on the porch, arms crossed, mirroring his stance. She didn't say a word, just watched. The silent enforcer. The witness to my utter humiliation. Insurance requirements, Ron went on, his voice taking on that false authority he always used when he didn't know what he was talking about. Professional assessment of the property value. You wouldn't understand the complexity. My whole body screamed to move. To shove him aside, climb into that dumpster, rescue every single piece of Maggie from the mud. My hands were shaking, my fists so tight my nails cut into my palms. But then, like a phantom limb, my mother's voice echoed in my skull. Family is everything, Chloe. Respect your elders. Be the bigger person. Keep the peace. I'd heard it my whole life. Internalized it until it became the steel bars of my own cage. So I stood there, shaking, frozen. Unable to move forward. Unable to speak the words burning in my throat. Ron mistook my paralysis for surrender. He turned back toward the house, dismissing me with a wave. Don't make this hard on the family, Chloe, he called over his shoulder. Elaine finally spoke from the porch, her voice cutting and cold. We're doing what's necessary. Necessary. As if necessity justified erasing someone. I should leave. Drive away before I did something I regretted. But my feet wouldn't move. Instead, I reached into that dumpster, stretching until my ribs pressed against the cold metal edge. My fingers closed around one of the journals, pulling it free. The leather cover was damp, smeared with mud. But when I opened it, Maggie's handwriting was still visible. May 1998. Planted the tomatoes early this year. Chloe helped dig the rows. I was 12 that summer. Ron watched from the porch as I walked back to my car, the rescued journal clutched against my chest. He didn't try to stop me. Why would he? He thought he'd already won. I slid behind the wheel, gently placed the journal on the passenger seat. My hands were filthy with dumpster grime. My vision blurred at the edges, but I wasn't crying. I wasn't crying because underneath the shock and the hurt, something else was crystallizing. Something cold. Something clear. Ron wasn't just neglectful. He wasn't just incompetent. He was erasing Maggie deliberately, throwing her away like garbage. This wasn't some mistake. It was a conscious choice. That realization settled into my bones as I started the engine. And as I drove away, watching the ranch disappear in my rearview mirror, I made a decision that would change everything. I was done being the good niece. 3 days later, I was back. But this time, I parked a quarter-mile down the road, tucked deep into the dense brush behind an abandoned shed. My sedan, invisible. The morning air bit cold against my face as I cut through the sagebrush on foot, avoiding the main driveway entirely. The new deadbolts on the front door gleamed. Shiny brass hardware that probably cost more than the monthly utility bills I'd paid here. For 6 years. Ron's truck wasn't in the yard. Neither was Elaine's SUV. The house looked empty, but I moved carefully anyway, pressing close to the weathered siding. The cellar door. It was exactly where I remembered it, hidden by 20 years of ivy growth. The wooden frame half-rotted, the kind of detail Ron would never bother inspecting. Too dirty. Too beneath his attention. I pushed aside the thick vines, their leaves rustling loud in the silence, and there it was. The old iron lock Maggie never replaced. My spare key slid in like it was waiting for me. The lock clicked. The sound made my heart jump even though I was alone. I eased the door open, wincing at the creak of hinges that hadn't moved in months. Darkness yawned below. I pulled out my phone, thumbed on the flashlight, and descended stone steps slick with moisture. The cellar smelled like earth and old wood, and something else, abandonment. The beam cut through the dark, catching cobwebs and dust motes. I crossed the dirt floor to the interior stairs, each step deliberate, listening for any sound above. When I emerged into the kitchen, I literally stopped breathing. Everything was wrong. The table where Maggie and I had sewn that quilt? Shoved against the far wall, buried under cardboard boxes. The grandfather clock that stood in the hallway for 40 years was gone. Just a clean rectangle on the wallpaper where it used to be. The walls themselves looked bare, stripped. Photos removed, their outlines visible in the faded paint. I moved through the house like a ghost, cataloging the destruction. The living room furniture, rearranged into careless clusters. Maggie's reading chair, facing the wrong direction. The bookshelf, holding nothing but a few water-damaged paperbacks Ron probably deemed worthless. The study door was open. Papers covered every surface inside. I stepped over a collapsed stack of file folders and approached the desk. This was Ron's work. His handwriting scrawled across sticky notes plastered to the lamp, the wall, the desk calendar. Reminders about appraisals, inspections, closing dates. The cold, hard language of liquidation. My hands felt steadier than they had any right to be as I started searching. The top drawer yielded nothing. The second drawer stuck halfway, jammed with junk mail. I pulled harder and it gave, contents spilling across the floor. And that's when I saw it. The survey map. It was wedged between two catalogs, one corner visible. I yanked it free, spread it across the desk, smoothing the creases with trembling fingers. Turner Commercial Plaza. The header read, bold and unmistakable. A developer's draft. Parking lots drawn where the pasture should be. Retail spaces plotted across the land Maggie spent her life protecting. The date stamp in the corner made my stomach drop. 8 months before Maggie died. Ron planned this while she was still alive. My breath came short as I scanned the margins. His handwriting was there too, notes scribbled in blue ink. Clear by Q2 next to the barn location. Max liquidity underlined twice near the property value estimate. I sank into the desk chair, the map clutched in my fists. He wasn't reacting to estate pressure. He wasn't scrambling. He'd already decided to sell. Already found a developer. Already mapped out the destruction of everything Maggie built. My hands moved on autopilot, digging through the remaining papers. There had to be more. There had to be proof of why. And then I found it. The loan application. Hidden beneath a stack of grocery circulars. Crumpled. Nearly thrown away. I flattened it against the desk. Application rejected in red letters. The date matched the survey map. Give or take a week. The applicant line? Ron's signature. And there, under proposed collateral, typed in neat bureaucratic font, Turner Ranch, 96 acres. He tried to use the ranch for his own loan. The bank refused because he didn't own it. Couldn't use what wasn't his. So he waited. Waited for Maggie to die. Waited to pretend the estate needed liquidation when really, he just needed to cover his own debts. I photographed everything. The map. The loan rejection. His handwritten notes. My phone's camera clicked rapid fire in the silent study, each image backing up automatically to the cloud. Evidence. Proof. Ammunition. The sound of tires on gravel froze me mid-motion. Ron was back. I shoved the documents into approximate disorder and moved fast. Down into the dark cellar. Across the dirt floor. Up through the exterior entrance. The ivy fell back into place as I eased the door shut, my pulse hammering in my ears. By the time Ron's truck door slammed, I was already halfway through the sagebrush invisible. 2 days later, I was in William Hartley's office. The place felt like stepping back in time. Oak paneling. Leather chairs worn soft from decades of use. Law books lining the walls. Hartley himself, 70, sharp-eyed, with the patient demeanor of someone who'd seen every trick twice. I spread the photographs across his desk without a preamble. He studied them in silence, reading glasses perched on his nose. When he looked up, something in his expression had shifted. Hardened. The deed is valid, he said, his voice quiet, but firm. Inter vivos transfer. Maggie signed the title over to you in February 2022. The ranch was never part of the estate. The words landed like absolution. Like a heavy weight I hadn't known I was carrying, suddenly lifted. Then we can stop him, I said, a desperate hope in my voice. Right now, before he sells. Hartley removed his glasses, folding them with deliberate care. We could. But Ron would fight it. Use estate funds to drag you through court for years. Expensive years. So what do? I demanded. Let him commit. Hartley's voice dropped lower. Let him sign contracts with the developer. Let him prove bad faith in writing. Then you produce the deed. Not before. After. I leaned back in the chair, processing. You want me to let him think he's winning? I want you to let him prove he's guilty. Hartley tapped the photo of the loan rejection. This isn't negligence. This is fraud. But we need him to demonstrate intent. Give him rope. Let him hang himself. The drive home felt different. The weight was gone, replaced by something colder, something focused. I wasn't defending anymore. I was hunting. That evening, I created a new folder on my laptop. Blue. I labeled it Turner Ranch Documentation and began uploading files. The deed Maggie gave me years ago. The photos from Hartley's office. Then my own. The rotting eaves Ron ignored. The horses he'd neglected. The crumbling barn he refused to repair. Every dismissive email. Every text message. Timestamps on everything. The cloud backup confirmed. I closed the laptop with a quiet click. A few days later, Sam Miller, the ranch handyman, found me photographing the damaged fence line near the north pasture. I didn't even hear him approach until his shadow fell across my viewfinder. Documenting his negligence, he asked. I lowered the camera. Sam just stood there in his work jacket, weathered hands loose at his sides. He'd been the gardener and handyman here for 20 years. He saw everything I did. Everything Ron didn't. Yeah, I said simply. Sam nodded once. Didn't ask why. Didn't offer advice. Just looked at me with those kind, knowing eyes and said, Maggie knew what she was doing when she signed that deed. The words settled into my bones like absolute truth. I wasn't alone. That night, an email landed in my inbox. Subject line, important family update. Sent to the entire family distribution list. Ron's name in the sender field made my jaw clench before I even opened it. Great news coming at the reunion. Big decisions ahead for all of us. Mark your calendars. More details to follow. I read it twice. Then a third time. The cursor blinked in the reply field. My fingers hovered over the keys. A dozen furious responses formed in my mind. Questions. Accusations. Demands. But I just closed the laptop without typing a word. My silence wasn't weakness anymore. It was a strategy. Every day Ron thought I'd accepted defeat was another day he dug himself deeper. Another day he committed to a sale he had no legal right to make. Another day he proved William Hartley exactly right. I actually smiled. Let him think he'd won. Let him send his triumphant emails and plan his big announcement. When the trap finally sprang, he wouldn't even see it coming. Months passed in a blur of strategy and silence. Summer burned out, autumn leaves fell, and then the true Idaho winter descended. The temperature dropped 15 degrees in 3 days. I noticed it first at the ranch on a Thursday evening in late January, driving out after work with my headlamp and toolkit in the back seat. The cellar door resisted, metal hinges contracting in the cold. Inside, my breath came out in visible puffs under the bare bulb. January in Idaho isn't a possibility anymore. It's a brutal reality. The barn was worse. I pushed through the side door and the cold hit me like a physical wall. Not the mild chill from last month. This was aggressive. The kind of cold that settles into your joints and refuses to leave. I flipped the light switch and the overhead fluorescence flickered on, illuminating breath clouds from the stalls. Maggie's 2 remaining Maras, Stella and Daisy, stood with their heads low. Their breath came out in thick white plumes. When Stella shifted her weight, I could see goosebumps rippling across her flank. Her winter coat hadn't fully grown in yet. I checked the heating oil gauge mounted near the door. Empty. The needles sat firmly on 0. My phone buzzed in my pocket. An email from Ron to the family group thread, sent 20 minutes ago while I was driving. Update. Implementing cost-cutting measures before closing. Heating oil delivery canceled for barn. Developer assessment next month. I read it 3 times. The developer assessment. The one that would show the ranch in perfect condition, ready for demolition and conversion to Turner Commercial Plaza. The heating oil expense would show up as overhead, making the property look less profitable. So Ron cut it. Made the numbers prettier for his buyer. And the horses froze. My hands were shaking, but not from the cold. I couldn't intervene legally. Not yet. Hartley was clear, revealing the deed now meant years of court battles while Ron used estate funds to fight me. The trap only worked if Ron committed fully to the sale, proving his bad faith beyond any doubt. But I couldn't let the animals suffer while I waited for strategy to align. I pulled up the Tractor Supply website on my phone. Portable space heaters, commercial grade, $200 each. I'd need at least 4. Thermal blankets for the horses. Another 100. Extra hay bales because they'd need more calories to stay warm. Another 200 for delivery tonight. $800 total. I worked through the checkout process, entering my debit card information with numb fingers. The confirmation email arrived, delivery between 8 and 10 p.m. That gave me 2 hours. I spent it hauling every spare blanket I could find in the house storage closets, draping them over the stall doors to block drafts. I stuffed old towels and rags into the gaps where the barn siding had warped with age. Stella watched me work, her dark eyes following my movements. When I passed her stall, she pressed her nose against my shoulder. Warm breath against my frozen cheek. "I know," I whispered. "I'm here." The delivery truck arrived at 9:15. The driver helped me unload the heaters and hay bales, eyeing the dark property with curiosity, but asking no questions. Cash transaction. No receipt with Ron's name on it. He drove away, and I was alone with 4 industrial heaters and a plan that violated every strategic instinct Hartley tried to teach me. I plugged in the first heater near Stella's stall. The orange glow filled the corner of the barn, and within minutes, I could feel the difference. Not warm yet, but the aggressive edge of cold retreated slightly. I positioned the other 3 heaters strategically, creating pockets of warmth that overlapped near the stall areas. The thermal blankets went over both horses, secured with the chest straps designed for this purpose. I was adjusting Daisy's blanket when I heard boots on gravel outside. My hand froze. The barn door was already open from the delivery, and I'd left the cellar entrance unlocked behind me. Stupid. I was so focused on the horses, I forgot basic security. The footsteps stopped at the barn entrance. Thought I saw lights. Sam Miller's voice. Not Ron. Not Elaine. I turned slowly, still crouched beside Daisy's stall. Sam stood in the doorway, his weathered face shadowed by the heater glow behind me. He was wearing a heavy canvas jacket and work gloves, dressed for cold night labor. His eyes moved from me to the heaters, to the thermal blankets. He didn't ask what I was doing here. Didn't question my right to be on property Ron claimed to control. Instead, he walked to the far wall where the insulation had torn away from the studs, leaving gaps that let in wind. He examined it for a long moment, running his gloved hand along the damaged section. "This won't hold heat," he said. "Got some foam board in my truck. Be right back." He was gone before I could respond. When he returned, he was carrying rigid foam insulation panels and a cordless drill. We worked in silence for the next 2 hours. Sam cut and fit the panels while I held them in place. He drilled them into the studs with practiced efficiency, sealing the gaps that had leaked warmth for probably 5 winters. Every few panels, he paused to check his work, adjusting angles, adding extra screws where the barn wall curved slightly. The only sounds were the drill, the soft shuffle of horses in their stalls, and our breathing. Around 11, Sam produced a thermos from his jacket. He poured coffee into the cap and handed it to me without asking if I wanted any. The liquid was still hot enough to burn my tongue, bitter and perfect. We stood side by side near one of the heaters, warming our hands on the thermos. Snow began to fall outside, small flakes at first, then larger ones that caught the light from the barn windows. Sam watched them accumulate on the gravel, his expression unreadable. Then he spoke. "Maggie told me what she did." My hand tightened on the thermos cap. "The deed," he continued. "February 2022. She had me witness the notary appointment. Said you were the only one who loved the land, not the money." The validation hit me harder than I expected. My throat closed, and I had to look away, focusing on the falling snow until I could trust my voice. "Ron doesn't know. Ron's an idiot." Sam took the thermos cap back, poured himself coffee. "I wanted to tell you sooner, Chloe, but Maggie made me swear on her Bible. Said you had to find your own fight first. Said if I handed it to you, it wouldn't mean as much." He paused, watching the snow fall. "Maggie knew that too. Why she chose you." We finished the coffee in silence. When Sam finally left around midnight, He paused at the barn door. "You need anything else?" "I'm 10 minutes down the road." He pulled a card from his pocket, set it on the workbench. His cell number, written in permanent marker. Day or night. The door closed behind him, and I was alone with the horses and the heaters and the truth that had been building since the dumpster. Maggie saw me, chose me, trusted me. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't selfish. I wasn't the problem Ron had spent months telling the family I was. My phone buzzed. Another text from Ron. Sent to just me this time. "Why so quiet, Chloe? Finally accepting reality?" I read it twice. Then I set the phone face down on the workbench without responding. For 6 years, I answered every question. Explained every decision. Justified every hour I spent here. Seeking approval that never came. Permission I never needed. My silence used to mean submission. Now it meant something else entirely. I checked the heaters one more time before I left, adjusting the settings to maintain steady warmth through the night. The horses were already drowsy in their thermal blankets, the barn temperature hovering at a survivable 50 degrees. Over the next week, Ron's texts multiplied. Developer coming next month. Time to be realistic. Family unity requires compromise, Chloe. Your silence is noted. I saved every message, screenshotted them with timestamps, uploaded them to the cloud drive where I kept the survey map and the loan application. Each text was more aggressive than the last, Ron's frustration bleeding through the professionally worded threats. The blue folder grew thicker. On Tuesday, a certified mail notice appeared in my apartment mailbox. I signed for the package on Wednesday morning before work. The envelope was heavy, cream-colored, and official-looking. I opened it in my car before starting the engine. Turner family reunion. Mandatory attendance. The date was mid-February. Location: Turner Ranch. Agenda: final decisions regarding estate liquidation. Ron's personal note was paper-clipped to the formal invitation, his handwriting aggressive and cramped. Time to make this official, Chloe. The developer needs an answer. My hands didn't shake when I slid the invitation into the blue folder, filing it behind the deed and the survey map and the months of documented evidence. The clock had run out. The trap was ready. On the reunion day, the ranch house hadn't held this many people since Grandma Maggie's funeral. 35 relatives filled the rooms, their voices bouncing off walls that used to absorb only silence and my solitary footsteps. I stood near the kitchen doorway, watching cousins I hadn't seen in years pile plates with catered food that must have cost a fortune. Estate funds, probably. Ron's idea of magnanimity. White tablecloths covered every surface, crisp and formal. Nothing about this felt like the ranch I knew. Ron moved through the crowd in a suit. Actual wool. Tailored. The kind he'd mock other men for wearing to anything less than a wedding. He was playing a role today. Shaking hands. Touching shoulders. The benevolent patriarch distributing wisdom and difficult decisions. Elaine worked the perimeter. I tracked her movement from aunt to cousin to uncle. Her hand landing on forearms. Her voice low and sympathetic. Planting seeds. Watering the narrative she and Ron had cultivated for months. Such a stubborn girl, a whisper came from somewhere behind me. Doesn't understand the financial reality. Maggie would want what's best for everyone, not just Chloe's sentimental notions. I pressed my spine against the doorframe. The canvas bag hung from my shoulder, its weight familiar. The blue folder inside felt heavier than paper should. Ron clapped his hands twice, sharp cracks that silenced the room. Family, if we could all gather in the dining area. His voice carried the false warmth of a car salesman. I have a presentation that will clarify our situation. People shuffled, holding plates and wine glasses. Ron had set up his laptop on the sideboard, a cable snaking to the flat-screen TV mounted above the fireplace. The screen glowed blue, waiting. I took a seat at the far end of the main table, the chair Maggie used to occupy. No one protested. The first slide appeared, Turner Estate Financial Reality in bold letters over a photo of the barn I knew Ron hadn't entered in years. As executor, I've conducted a comprehensive assessment. Ron advanced to the next slide. Numbers filled the screen. Property taxes, maintenance costs, projected repairs. Every figure inflated beyond recognition. The debt burden is unsustainable. A cousin to my left leaned forward, studying the numbers. Aunt Martha covered her mouth. Next slide. Photos of the ranch, each carefully selected. The rotting eave I reported to Ron months ago, never fixed. The fence section that collapsed last winter when he refused to budget for posts. The peeling paint on the barn's north side. Every image screamed neglect, and none showed the work I'd done. The repaired stalls, the maintained pastures, the garden I'd kept alive. The property has fallen into disrepair. Ron's tone suggested tragedy rather than his own intentional abandonment. Continuing to maintain it would consume resources the family can't afford. My fingers curled around the bag strap. The final slides showed an architectural rendering. Glass and steel where the barn stands. Paved parking where Maggie's garden grew. Commercial plaza rendered in clean fonts and modern angles. The solution is straightforward. Ron paused for effect. A reputable developer has offered $1,650,000 for the property. Murmurs rippled through the room. Someone whistled low. This allows us to preserve the family legacy by converting it to liquid assets. Everyone benefits. The Turner name endures in a new form. The screen went dark. Ron closed his laptop with a decisive click. I watched him, my mind racing. He was bluffing about a finalized deal. No developer cuts a check without a clear title search. Unless this consensus document wasn't just a formality. It was a power of attorney. He needed us to sign away our rights so he could leverage the estate to get the deposit he desperately needed to cover his own debts. Which brings me to the final matter. He produced a clipboard from behind the sideboard. Paper attached. Official looking. A heavy silver pen rested on top. The kind that costs more than it should. I've prepared a family consensus document. Simple formality. Everyone here has already reviewed and agreed. He walked the length of the table, his steps measured, confident. The clipboard landed directly in front of me with a soft thud. All 34 other people turned their heads. The document was dense with legal language. I'd need an hour to parse it properly. Signatures filled the bottom 2/3. Names I recognized. Uncle Jim. Aunt Martha. Cousins I played with as a child. All in agreement. One line remained blank. Mine. We just need your blessing, Chloe. Ron's voice was gentle now. Almost paternal. Then we can move forward as a united family. Elaine appeared on my shoulder. Her hand settled there, warm and heavy. Do the right thing, honey. Pressure built in the silence. 34 pairs of eyes. Some sympathetic. Some impatient. Some already counting their share of that $1.65 million. Ron had already turned away from me, angling toward the corner where a man in an expensive suit stood apart from the family. The developer's representative. Ron gave him a subtle nod, the gesture of someone already celebrating. I reached for the pen. My hand shook as I lifted it. The tremor was visible. Humiliating. I felt small, holding this pen. Isolated at the end of this long table, surrounded by family who had already decided my fate. The room exhaled. Shoulders relaxed. Elaine's grip loosened slightly. I held the pen over the signature line. The blank space where my name should go. My hand hovered there, shaking, and I closed my eyes. Breathe. Maggie's face surfaced in the darkness. Her hands covered in garden soil, laughing as I struggled with crooked fence posts. Her voice, when she handed me the key 6 years ago, "You're the only one who sees it, Chloe. The only one who understands what this place means." And then, February 2022. The lawyer's office. Her signature next to mine on different paper. I opened my eyes. The pen cap clicked closed between my fingers. The sound cut through the silence like a blade. I set the pen down. Still capped. Untouched to paper. Before I sign, Ron. My voice was quiet, but it carried. It was the academic advisor voice I used when a student had falsified their transcripts. Professional. Measured. I have one procedural question. Ron's expression flickered. The confident smirk wavered at the edges. Procedural? He forced a laugh. Chloe, this isn't complicated. Did you personally pull the deed from the county recorder's office? The room's energy shifted. Confusion replacing expectation. People glanced at each other, uncertain what this meant. Ron waved a dismissive hand. Why would I need to check what I already control? The will was explicit. I'm the executor. This is my authority. Right. I reached down to the bag at my feet. My hands were steady now. Your authority. The blue folder slid out onto the white tablecloth. Every eye in the room locked onto it. I met Ron's gaze directly for the first time all day. I held it. Didn't blink. His smirk had vanished completely. I opened the blue folder. The sound of the clasp releasing felt enormous in my ears. Inside, the documents were arranged exactly as William Hartley and I had prepared them. Each page protected in a clear sleeve. Each piece of evidence in perfect sequence. I slid the first document across the polished wood table. Then you don't know Grandma Maggie transferred the title of this land to me. 2 years ago. February 2022. The paper glided to a stop in front of Ron. Official county letterhead across the top. Margaret Ellen Turner's signature in her careful cursive. My signature beside hers, younger and less steady. The county recorder's stamp in blue ink, raised and textured where the seal pressed into the paper. Inter vivos transfer. Property deed. Recorded and legal. Ron's hand shot out and snatched the document. His eyes scanned the page. Once. Twice. His face shifting through expressions too quickly to track. This is a forgery. His voice was loud, but there was something underneath it now. Something that wasn't there before. I pulled the second document from the folder. Here's the notary log. 3 witness signatures. The notary's stamp matches the one on the deed. Ron's face flushed red. She was senile. She didn't know what she was signing. Around the table, relatives leaned forward. Cousin Dave reached for the deed and Ron jerked it away from him. Dr. Keller's medical capacity affidavit. I placed the third document on the table. Dated the same day as the deed. February 14th, 2022. It states Grandma Maggie was of sound mind and fully understood the legal implications of the property transfer. Elaine's hand dropped from my shoulder. Ron stood up, the chair scraping loud against the floor. She didn't understand the financial necessity. The taxes. The maintenance costs. She was living in the past. Not facing reality. I'd been waiting for this. For the moment he'd pivot from legal arguments to emotional ones. When he'd try to make this about Maggie's supposed ignorance instead of his own scheming. I pulled out the draft survey map. The paper unfolded across the table, and I smoothed it flat with both hands. Turner Commercial Plaza. The header read. The date in the corner was 8 months before Maggie died. Ron's handwriting filled the margins. Clear by Q2. Max liquidity. The silence in the room changed texture. Became something thicker. And you didn't do this for the family. My voice was steady. I'd practiced this moment in my head 100 times, but now that it was happening, the words came easily. Naturally. You did it because the bank rejected your personal loan. The final document. The crumpled loan application I found buried in his messy study, smoothed out and photocopied. Ron's signature at the bottom. Turner Ranch. 96 acres. Listed as collateral. The red, denied stamp across the top. I watched understanding spread through the room like spilled water. Aunt Martha's hand rose to cover her mouth. Uncle Jim pushed his chair back, the legs squealing. Ron tried to use the ranch as collateral. The bank rejected him because he didn't hold the title. He couldn't leverage property that wasn't his. I kept my eyes on Ron's face. You weren't saving the estate. You were trying to get us to sign a power of attorney so you could secure a deposit. Selling property you didn't own to cover your tracks. The developer representative stood. He didn't say anything at first, just reached down and picked up his briefcase. When he spoke, his voice was clipped. Professional. This deal is dead. Title isn't clear. He walked out. His footsteps echoed down the hallway, and then the front door closed with a final, decisive click. Cousins reached for the documents, passing them hand to hand, reading the dates, the signatures, the evidence of Ron's planning while Maggie was still alive. Ronald, Aunt Martha's voice shook. You lied to all of us. Uncle Jim was on his feet now. You said Chloe was being selfish. You said she abandoned Maggie. She did abandon her. Elaine's voice cracked across the room. This is a betrayal of family trust. I stood. Not quickly. Not dramatically. I simply rose from my chair, and the room fell silent. The truth was spreading. I could see it in their faces. 6 years of weekend drives. 6 years of fence repairs and veterinary bills and sitting beside Maggie's bed while Ron planned commercial plazas and loan applications. This is private property. The words felt strange in my mouth. Foreign. I'd never said anything like this before. Never drawn a line this sharp. You have 1 hour to vacate. No apology in my voice. No softness. No attempt to cushion the blow or make it easier for anyone. Just the boundary. Clear. Immovable. Ron opened his mouth, but nothing came out. The authority he wore like armor had cracked. And underneath there was just a man who gambled on a property he never owned. Elaine grabbed her purse from the side table. Her face was crimson. Lips pressed into a thin white line. She didn't look at me as she moved toward the door. Relatives gathered their things. Some avoided my eyes. Others nodded slightly as they passed, something like respect or shame in their expressions. Movement in the doorway caught my attention. Sam Miller stood there, his weathered face creased in something that might have been a smile. He heard everything. Of course he did. He'd been waiting for this moment as long as I had. William Hartley appeared behind him, briefcase in hand. I can help coordinate the exit if needed. Ron was the last to move. He stood by the table, the deed still in his hand. For a moment, I thought he might try to take it, to destroy it, but he just let it fall back onto the wood surface. When he walked past me, he didn't speak. The man who threw Maggie's journals into the dumpster, who changed the locks, who tried to erase her, he had nothing left to say. The door closed behind him, and I was alone in my grandmother's house. My house now. The owner, not the trespasser. The steward, not the thief. I sank back into the chair and let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. The driveway looked different without the dumpster. I pulled up to Turner Ranch on a Sunday afternoon in late August, 6 months after the reunion that changed everything. The same dirt road, the same bend in the fence line where sage grew wild, but the flowers were blooming now. Purple lupin and yellow arrowleaf crowded the gateposts where weeds used to choke the ground. The barn wore fresh red paint. The fences stood white and straight. The horses grazed in the pasture with healthy coats that caught the sunlight, no longer shivering in their stalls. Sam Miller's truck sat near the renovated bunkhouse where he lives now, rent-free, caretaker, and friend. The arrangement suited us both. I parked and gathered the pie William Hartley dropped off this morning, homemade cherry, still warm in its dish. He visits monthly these days, always bringing legal updates wrapped in conversation and baked goods. Today, he's staying for dinner. Inside, the dining room table seats 8. 3 of my colleagues from the university are already here, laughing about something that happened at registration last week. They understand now why I was so distracted last year, why I kept checking my phone during meetings and disappeared on weekends. Sam sits at the head of the table with me, an honored guest in the home he helped save. He's telling a story about the garden's tomato harvest, his weathered hands gesturing as he describes the vines heavy with fruit. Maggie would have been proud, he says, and the words settle warm in my chest. William arrives as we're setting out plates. He places the pie on the counter and shakes hands with everyone, his sharp eyes taking in the renovated kitchen with approval. The oppressive silence that used to fill this house has been replaced by something lighter. Laughter, the clink of silverware, normal sounds that feel revolutionary. Over dinner, conversation drifts to the legal resolution. One of my colleagues asks about Ron, and I realize I haven't thought about him in weeks. The court appointed a neutral administrator for the remaining cash assets, William explains, helping himself to roasted potatoes. Once the fraud evidence surfaced, Ron was removed as executor entirely. Some relatives took his side, I add, passing the salad bowl. We haven't spoken since the reunion. My colleague Sarah winces. That must be hard. I consider this. 6 months ago, the thought would have crushed me. Family is everything. Keep the peace. Be the bigger person. I didn't lose family, I say now, and I mean it. I lost people who enabled theft. The weight I carried for so long is gone. These people around my table, they're built on honesty, not obligation. Not blind loyalty to blood ties that meant nothing when I needed help. After dinner, I walk the fence line alone as the sun drops toward the horizon, the same walk I took for 6 years when this place wasn't officially mine. When I fixed posts and paid utility bills and sat with dying Maggie while Ron stayed away. But everything feels different now. My boots follow the path I wore into the grass. I'm not the helper anymore, sneaking onto property that belonged to someone else. I'm the owner. The steward. The one Maggie chose. Her wisdom proved true in the end. I stop at the gate where Ron locked me out before, where I stood trembling with rage, unable to physically confront him because my conditioning wouldn't allow it. A new lock gleams in the evening light. My key. My choice. Inside the house, visible through the window, the journal I rescued from the dumpster sits in a glass case. Maggie's handwriting is preserved. Her memory is honored, not erased. The sunset paints the sky in shades of orange and purple, colors so vivid they seem unreal. 96 acres stretch before me, land I saved by loving it when no one else would, by showing up every weekend for 6 years, by choosing labor over entitlement. I pull the gate closed and turn the key. The lock clicks with satisfying finality, not keeping people out, but keeping peace in. I stand there a moment longer, breathing the cooling air, watching shadows lengthen across the property. Somewhere in the pasture, a horse snorts. The barn door creaks on its hinges, small sounds that belong to me now. Grandma knew. She always knew. I pocket the key and walk back toward the house, where light spills warm from the windows and my friends are probably arguing over who does dishes. Real family. The kind you build yourself. The kind that stays.